But let's look at the eternal consequences. In 1 Peter 2:11, Peter talks about the fleshly lusts which wage war against your soul. Now, I want you to think about that phrase. Your fleshly lusts are waging war. Now, when two armies are waging war, what is their objective? Destroy. Destroy the enemy. Do you know your fleshly lusts, if you allow them to, will destroy your soul? They will destroy you. You have to go after your lust like you would your worst enemy that's trying to kill you. You ought not fondle your lust, toy with your lust, compromise with your lust, make provision for your lust. You have to go after it and kill it. That's how the Bible describes dealing with this particular subject. It's like a cancer. When someone first gets cancer, they may not even know it. They may not even feel any different. They may look the same on the outside. But slowly and gradually, they feel the effects of the cancer working its way on the inside. Right? They start to get weaker and weaker until the point where their strength is completely gone and the cancer takes their life. And that's what lust does if we indulge in it. It causes you to be weaker and weaker spiritually. You have less and less of the vitality of God, and to the point where you are just destroyed spiritually. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 to 30, Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." Now, what is Jesus saying there? It seems very clear from the outset to me. He's saying, if you do not tear out right eyes or cut off right arms, you will end up in hell. The context here is lust. Verse 27 is speaking about looking at a woman to lust for her has committed adultery already in his heart. And then he goes on to say, if your right eye, which is what you lust with, causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. Now we know he's talking figuratively and metaphorically, but at the least we can say, if you and I do not fight our lusts, we will end up in hell. I don't care if you've made a profession of Christ or not. I don't care if you said the sinner's prayer. I don't care if you've walked an aisle. Jesus is talking to disciples here. And Jesus says, you will be in hell unless you deal radically and severely with lust in your life. That's how serious this issue is. I can't overstate this. Look at Ephesians chapter 5. And I know some of the thoughts that are going around in your mind, we'll get to that in just a minute. But let's establish this. This is a biblical truth that people who practice lust and sexual sin will end up in hell. No questions about it. Ephesians 5, 3-6. He says, but immorality. Now, let me just stop there. The word immorality means sexual immorality. It's the Greek word porneia. We get our word pornography from it. It's the word for any sexual sin. It can be bestiality, incest, rape, prostitution, adultery, fornication. Take your pick. Any sexual sin is included in that word immorality. He says, but immorality or any impurity or greed must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. And there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. For this you know with certainty, that no immoral, and it's the same word there, porneia, no immoral or impure person or covetous man who is an idolater has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, what? What's the rest of the sentence? The wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Because of what things? Well, immorality, impurity, an immoral life, an impure life. That person has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God, and instead the wrath of God is going to come upon him. It's plain as day, right? How can we miss that in our Bibles? So I don't want anyone here to think that you can go on living a lustful life, committing sexual sin, and live in that kind of lifestyle and end up in heaven. And I know preachers will tell you that you can, because they'll say, well, once saved, always saved. If you said the sinner's prayer, you're good. First of all, where in the world is the sinner's prayer in the Bible? Right? I've never found it. Secondly, true justifying faith is proven by a life of holiness. And here's the question I think that you're probably thinking. So, Brian, are you saying I can lose my salvation if I indulge in lust? No. I'm saying you were never saved. You are not a Christian. And you're proving it if you go on living, practicing lust and sexual sin. And on the final day, when you stand before God, He's not going to let you in because you said, well, Lord, I said the sinner's prayer. I walked down an aisle. He said, I wasn't asking you to do that. I was asking you to repent of all your sins and follow my Son. And you proved that you didn't do it. You didn't have true faith in me. No, you can't lose your salvation. There are two kinds of texts in the Bible. We've read a bunch of texts that talk about people ending up in hell who practice sin. That's true. But there's also a bunch of texts over here that say that the true believer can never lose his salvation. For example, Romans 8, verse 30. It says, those whom He has called, He also justified. And those whom He justified, He also glorified. If you've been justified, you're going to be glorified. No doubt about it. We also find in Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's the gift of God, not a result of works, lest any man should boast. Folks, I'm not telling you that you need to work in order to obtain salvation. Nothing of the kind. I'm telling you that if God has saved you, then you have a kind of faith that will result in a life of holiness. And if it doesn't result in a life of holiness, you don't have justifying faith. The kind of faith that justifies also sanctifies. The faith that delivers from hell will also deliver you from lust. Faith never produces perfection in this life, but it does produce a persevering fight against sin your whole life. Lust is never going to disappear completely from your life. You're going to have to fight it until you die, until your last breath. But its power over you can be subdued by the power of God. Romans 6:14 says, for sin shall not be master over you. Why? Because you're not under law, you're under grace. So if a person is under grace, sin shall not be master over that person. The power of enslaving sin is broken. Now, if he goes on to live in sin, that's his fault. It's not that God hasn't provided a way of escape for him. He certainly has. So if we give ourselves to lust, it can destroy and ruin our present life and then send us to a place of eternal punishment forever. So do you see how serious the issue is this morning that we're talking about?